Hi everybody, welcome back to the Bumps in the Night series. This is part 4. Tonight will probably be a little bit extensive. This is coming from my blog post that was archived as of March 2nd, 2013, to kind of give you an overview because it has been over a week since I taped last. Where we were last time is that I was living in Columbus, Ohio, staying in Columbus, Ohio, with my husband at the time, and we were living there while his plant was undergoing repair. It was a temporary stay because of a fire that had occurred at the main building that he worked in southwestern Ohio. I graduated from college in June of 1998, and again I'm referencing from the actual blog post, so if I keep looking away from the camera, that's why. I graduated from college, and we finally moved back to he moved back to southwestern Ohio, and I moved there. It was very different to me. I loved the house that we lived in, but I felt very lonely and very homesick, and I was very unsure of everything. I was stressed because of the paranormal activity that had occurred in Columbus. I feared that it would start at the house that we were residing in together, and in fact it did. One morning I was laying in bed and my husband had already gone to work. He worked a swing shift. 2 weeks he'd be on first, 2 weeks he'd be on second, and 2 weeks he'd be on third. And this particular week he was on first, and I was laying in the bed, and in that bedroom there was a closet like if you were looking this way, there's a closet on the right at the very end of the room, and it was a walk-in closet. It was awesome. And I remember the door was open, because like all I had to do during the day was housework, because I had not yet found a job after graduating college. So I left the door open a lot because there was just I didn't see any sense in closing it, because I was in there all the time anyway working with laundry. And I was laying in bed, my eyes were closed. In fact, I was praying in my morning prayer ritual, and from the closet I heard my name audibly 3 times. I was not dreaming. I was awake, and it was not something I imagined. As I've already said before, I am not crazy, although my current husband would probably say otherwise, but he's not here right now, so we'll just leave that between us. I had no idea what was happening, but it felt like deja vu, because we had just left Columbus, and I thought, oh my God, thank you for a fresh start. You know, hopefully this stuff won't happen, and I was completely and utterly wrong. I was not able to move. I was so scared. It wasn't that I was being held down again, it was that I was afraid to see what was in the closet. I eventually got up the courage to get out of bed, and I looked in the closet, and there was nothing there. I told my husband that night, and he took it well. I told my parents that night, or sometime during that day, and they came up to the house and they blessed the house. They anointed all of the doors with oil, the windows. They did their Christian ritual to bless a home. But I really didn't share anything else after that with anyone. I told my parents what was going on, and really after that, I didn't confide in anybody else about anything that was happening. And then in October of 1998, my husband and I got a dog. And months passed with no activity. There was nothing going on. Everything seemed normal. However, there would be evenings when my husband would go to work and I would just get really freaked out. I didn't like to be there by myself, which is why we got the dog. And that did ease things a little bit. I did end up finding a job and going on with life and, going through the motions and things like that. And then one morning I was getting ready for work and I heard the dog barking and growling in the front room. And when I looked, I walked down the hallway to look, and he was barking up at the hearth in the front room. And I got mad at that point. I felt like I was being victimized. So I started rebuking whatever was in the house. I quoted scripture. I was yelling. I forcefully told whatever was in the house to leave, that I was done being toyed with. In fact, to go back, I did share some of these things with my ex-mother-in-law, and she had some interpretations of everything that was going on, and I agreed with her on most of those. But like I said, there was a point where I just shut down and didn't tell anybody anything. This particular event that I'm talking about here, I kept it to myself. I don't believe I shared it with anybody that I can think of. After that, the dream activity in my life started to escalate. But they were very positive dreams, which I completely and utterly welcomed because I was tired of the horrifying nightmares. The first was of a beautiful angelic being, and it was night because I remember the angel lit up the room. She had very dark brown hair, long dark brown hair, just like mine. Mine hair's highlighted blonde now because I'm going gray. Another thing that we need to keep to ourselves. But at that time, I had very dark brown hair. And she was wearing a tunic, a white tunic, and a green knitted vest. And it was kind of square in shape. And my mother-in-law interpreted this to mean that I was seeing myself and that the vest equaled growth, that I was getting ready to go through a lot of growth. And her interpretation made sense to me at that time because I was very active in the church and I was starting to learn new things, and we were getting more responsibility in the church that we were in. And in fact, we were made into youth leaders. In case you can't hear that, that's thunder for dramatic effect. Another dream that I remember that was not so positive is that I was standing in the classroom in front of our teenage group that we had, and there was I'm sorry, back up. This is another positive dream. There was a negative dream that I had while I was a youth minister, but let's back up a little bit. We had not yet been made youth leaders, but we would be. So I think that this dream that I'm going to share with you was kind of a precursor to this is the responsibility that you're going to eventually have. sort of like a premonition, I guess. And I was standing in front of a group of teenagers, and there was a portable green chalkboard. And I don't remember what I was teaching about, but I remember thinking how dim everything looked. It just looked really dark out. I could see the kids, but it was very dark, and they were very shadowy. And then I remember being in the streets, like in the street that looked like to me what old Jerusalem would look like. And in the distance I could see a man, and he was walking towards me. And I remember thinking how beautiful he looked. He had wavy reddish brown hair, and he had the most serene, peaceful smile I had ever seen in my life. It was very comforting, and he wore a cream-colored tunic with a tan vest. And as he got closer to me, he literally like beamed with happiness and peace and love. And I knew immediately the closer he got to me who he was. And I remember him just smiling at me. He didn't say anything. He just smiled. When I think about it now, it makes me want to cry, because it was such overwhelming beauty in this one individual. And the next thing I know, that I'm sitting on the ground in what looks to me a forest floor. There are trees, there's greenery, there's grass, and I'm holding a Bible in my lap. And I remember having my finger on a piece of scripture in the book, and then I saw hands come out over top of mine, and they looked very strong and very capable. And I remember seeing scars, puncture wounds in the wrist. And I knew instantly that I was in the presence of Jesus Christ. And that was who was in the street in Jerusalem in my dream. And that dream changed me. It set me on a course to actually serve in the Christian faith. I think I was a bystander up to them, but then I decided it was time for me to serve and to mean it. And in 1999, my husband and I joined a local church where we were made youth pastors, as I said, and it made us a spiritual target. It almost put a bullseye on the back of our heads, because then the nightmarish dreams started. The first one that I can recall, I was actually sitting in the sanctuary of the church, and a woman was playing the piano. And I remember how awkward she looked, because like she had all this heavy makeup on and these inappropriate clothes that you would not see on someone in a church at that time. And I remember how awkward I felt, and my husband, I look over at him and he is just dazed, like this blank look on his face, and he's in this trance. And the woman looked over at me and she smiled, and she just looked like pure evil. And I remember feeling complete hatred coming from her. And then the next thing I know, she's sitting beside me, and my husband's head is in her lap, like he's laying down across us, and his head is in her lap. And I've discussed all this with my ex-mother-in-law, and my mom, and we knew something was coming. And in the next vision that I had, which was sometime after that one, this is the one where I was standing in the youth room with the youth kids, and I remember feeling trapped and panicked. And I knew there was someone that had gotten into the church, and I knew they were going to kill us. They were going to kill these kids, and they were going to kill me. And I tried to open the windows, but even if I was able to open them, I knew that we were not going to survive whatever was coming. I remember going to the corner, putting all the kids behind me to make sure that they were safe. And the next thing I know, I can hear people running up the stairs. And I remember thinking, we're dead. And when the intruders entered the room, they were dressed in black. And I know it was like it was sweats and a hood, like a black hoodie. And I remember knowing that I was going to be raped and killed. And it wasn't long after that where my husband and I experienced a severe trauma in the church. He had his pastorship taken away from him. And of course, I wasn't going to continue going to a church that wasn't going to support my husband, so I quit going. And I can say with certainty that that was the beginning of the end. In February of 2001, I discovered that I was pregnant. I couldn't go to church anymore, even if I wanted to. He continued to be faithful. Even though they were horrible to him, he continued to be faithful. And I also remember people getting angry with me because I wouldn't go to church anymore. I wasn't really able to go to church. I didn't understand it anymore. And plus I was pregnant. I wasn't feeling good. And then I started experiencing some problems in my pregnancy. And I thought I had miscarried. And they took blood at the initial onset of everything and said my levels were fine. And then they took a second one and didn't call me. So I called them and they said my levels had dropped and I had miscarried. And I did not believe it. So I went to my family doctor, who then ordered tests and found that I was pregnant, and his theory was that there were 2 embryos and that one of them didn't make it, and that it was an aborted pregnancy, a natural aborted pregnancy. The weaker the body did not allow to live. That whole time in my life was very hard. And I lost my job in April 2001. My husband lost his job in May of 2001. We were both unemployed. The demonic entity was back in the house because it would constantly hold me down and taunt me. And honestly, I didn't even care at that point. I was so done and defeated that I didn't care what happened. I didn't even fight at that point. When it would hold me down, I would just be like, whatever. If there's something you want to take it. I had lost a lot of hope. And then in the midst of all that pregnancy, in the midst of the pregnancy, they find out that I'm diabetic. And I have to go on the maximum amount of insulin that they can give me to counteract the diabetes. So there I am, pregnant, jobless, trying to support my husband morally because I know he's struggling. Dealing with the stress of the diabetes. And then at that point, the paranormal closed off to me completely. I was done. And then in July of 2013, I had started to graduate school to get my education degree, or my master's in education. And I had a dream that I was in a building where I knew a demon was, and it was trapped in a room. And they had called me there. Whoever it was had called me there. And when I walked into the building, I got the impression that the officials had no hope, and that this demon was going to destroy whatever was in this room that it had been locked in. And there were big wooden doors, and I could hear the awfulest ruckus in this room, like chairs flying and desks flying. And I remember calling into the demon, and when I entered the room, this flying cloaked figure comes to me and he says, I know John and I know Peter, but I don't know you. And I know now that I knew Scripture. I still know Scripture, and that's straight out of Scripture. And I actually told my mom about this dream. And I knew then that my faith was diminished, if not gone. My marriage ended up ending in 2003, and my entire life changed. And I left southwestern Ohio in August 2013 to come back to southern Ohio to be a single mom on government welfare, working a minimum wage job with no insurance. There was no way that I was able to have faith at that point, and my journey to atheism occurred then. So to end this evening, I want to try and leave you with some hope that even if you are struggling in the spiritual realm or in everyday life, there is hope. Even if you cannot see it or feel it, it is there, and it may be hiding. But eventually, whatever faith that it is that you believe in will bring it to fruition. So with that thought, I want to thank you for joining me and encourage you to check out my website. Once again, it's traceeford.com. You can leave comments here on YouTube. You can leave comments on Facebook. Again, there will be a time when I will start zoning in on some questions that people have asked and some content that people have shared with me. Again, it will be left anonymous.